The Thriller Zone with Dave Temple is sponsored by my good friends at The Story Factory, an entertainment company representing many of the biggest fiction and nonfiction authors in the world. Hello and welcome to The Thriller Zone. I'm your host, David Temple, and on today's 219th episode, I am pleased to welcome back for a return visit my friend, New York Times bestselling author Eric Rickstad. Eric has written another hit thriller, this time involving a serial killer in Remote the Six. Before we begin, three quick things to mention. First, if you enjoy the podcast and would like to see more conversations with today's biggest and best thriller, mystery, and suspense authors, be sure to subscribe. Second, if you're new to our show, please do me a favor and drop an email to say hello. The address is thethrillerzone@gmail.com. And third, if you or someone you know has a book coming out this year and you'd like to appear on the show, visit our website, thethrillerzone.com, and be sure to hit the register button. Now, let's meet our good friend and return wordsmith, Eric Rickstad. Welcome back to the Thriller Zone, Eric Rickstad. So good to see you.
So good to see you as well. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to get to this beautiful book, Remote the Six.
Yeah.
And in just a second, but I do want to do a little bit of catch up because I want to see what you've been up to since last we spoke. It hasn't been a year already, has it?
It has been, I think, just about.
Lilith.
A little over. Lilith came out, I think, March 11th last year or March 8th, something like that.
Wow.
So,
Eric, I have told so many people about that book.
thank you.
Yeah, no BS. That book, I don't know what it was. I think it was the right book at the right time with the right voice, besides your inimitable style that just blew me away. And I got friends writing me back going, dude, you were right. This book is amazing. I'm like, yeah. Thou shalt not leadeth thee in the wrong direction.
Right, exactly.
But then you come up with this book, and I'm like, I always wonder, see, when I read a book, especially with an author who is thinking about, I think I'm going to go off a little beaten path. I'm going to do a little something different. I always go, this could go good or bad. I mean, we all know that. There's the blessings and a curse.
Yeah.
But this one is a little bit off the beaten path.
Yes.
Stunning. But I want to come back to that because I want to find out what you've been doing. What have you been working on? So Lilith finished. You probably already started Remote the Six.
Yep.
Right.
Well, yeah, I was done Remote the 6 by that time and worked on Remote the 5, which is coming out in July. So,
wait, what?
yes. And I've been working on some. I'm always writing, so I've been working on some other things. Another novel, a crime saga, dark family crime saga that takes place in northern Idaho into Canada, and that's about a brother who never wanted to be a part of his family to begin with, and their violence and their crime, who is asked by the FBI to track his criminal brother across into Canada and kill him for them.
Oh.
And so even though, you might not get along with your brother and be, at odds, that's a big ask.
Yeah, that is.
It's about generational crime and not mafia, not mob, small crime, and not necessarily rural small town, but not necessarily. It's more about this guy not wanting anything to do with it. He's never wanted anything to do with it, never wanted anything to do with his brother or his father. And he has to make a decision. Do I go after my brother or do I face a huge consequence for not tracking him down?
And is that consequence perhaps getting himself whacked?
Not whacked necessarily, but going to prison probably.
Oh, okay.
For a long time, and jeopardizing his nephew, who is his older criminal brother's son that was abandoned by the criminal brother, and he's raised him as his own son, and that's really the big thing they hold over him.
You said something a second ago that made me think, and you're a great example of this. I talk to writers who go, I'm working on one book a year, and it's going to take me like a year and a half, and I'm like, wow, okay. And for the most part, I get that. Unless it's a really dense cross international borders, multi-story level, blah, blah, blah. But I listen to you and you're like, oh yeah, I've got the 6, I've written 5, it's coming out, before I can hardly get finished talking about the 6. And then I'm doing this thing over here and I'm doing that. So you're the personification of a writer who actually, oh, wait a minute, hold on, what's it called? Oh, that actually writes like all the time. So it begs the question, are you one of those cats that are just always, oh, I got an idea, I jot it in a note, I make a date, a time, I make some notes about it, put it aside. Yeah, if it blossoms later, great. If not, no biggie. Yeah?
Yeah, yeah, and it's I think I am certainly getting ideas all the time, and some stick and some don't. I'll write them down. I find the best ones are ones probably I never had to write down to begin with, like Lilith. It just kept that bothering me, and some other ones, and most of them, there's an image or something that angers me, or I want to look into more or explore more. Um, and Ray Bradbury, it's a paraphrase, but he had a great quote along the lines of, I hope I die before I run out of ideas, because I'd rather not be alive if I've run out of ideas. Not that he ever would have,
No.
but it's a good problem to have. And yeah, I just work on the one that's sort of compelling me the most at the time. And sometimes I'll put something aside. Lilith took 10 years, and I wrote 3 books while I was working on Lilith. And this book, I was talking about, the crime saga, called The Pursuit, is took me 3, 4, 5 years on and off. Then I went back to it, but I was working on other more ones that were pressing me more at the time.
You probably told me the 10-year angle on this when we were talking about Lilith last spring, but I don't recall that. 10, that's a pretty good amount of time to have something needling on the back of your brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And to write it, keep it from doing that. At least I'm getting some of it down, and I'm working with it and trying to figure it out and creating it, and get a lot of things wrong along the way that don't work, writing it in third person, writing it in past tense, writing it from a male point of view, until I finally arrive at, the incarnation that works the best.
Have you ever started in one direction, like for instance, first person, and go, nah, this has to be third, and then change, and maybe even be close to finish, and then turn around and change it?
Yeah, I mean, it was probably 3, 4 years into Lilith where it was a male point of view, it was third person, it was past tense, and I was like, this just isn't, it's just not working. I don't know, and one of it was that it was, the male point of view, and it just wasn't working because it was just another guy,
Yeah.
acting horribly. There wasn't any emotional, it was just straight out, just sort of revenge. But what reason really does he have except being angry? Whereas a mother, a school, who's a teacher, who's, single, who's got a son that's gone through it, made a lot more sense. So happens a lot. Happens a lot. It's when I find the voice really more than anything, the language for that particular story, where it really clicks.
So I got a personal question I want to ask you. Your agent is Shane Salerno, the Story Factory. How far into the book, and maybe into the book, and maybe in variations of the book in that 10-year period, how far in, at what point did you hand it to him and go, what do you think about this? Or did you wait till the very end and go, oh yeah, this baby's ready to rock, and hand it to him?
Yeah, that's usually how I work when I'm done. And I mean, I go over my work over and over and over and over and over again. Um, there'll be passages that have been written 20, 30 times, easy. So I'll get to a point where it's like, I really feel like, okay, this represents as well as I can get it on my own. This is where I think, okay, it's good. So never have I ever really shown anything to anyone during the process.
I think that's
I
wise
know it's
counsel.
going to change so much,
Yeah.
that, oh, wait, no. Oh, I just hit send. No, wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
We do it anyway, even when it's done, because then there's, input, and there's editors, and there's even my own brain where, as soon as you hit send, you're like, 20 things jump out, like, I spelled the title wrong,
Right.
or something, you know. My
I put
own
two
name,
L's.
my own name wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I did Eric with a K. God dang it.
what's that? You think I'd know by now?
Do you, so to finish, to put the pin on that one, do you recall how Shane reacted when you handed it to him when he got done reading
His
it?
first remark was, "This is a special book. This is a really special book, and it will not necessarily be an easy sell, or it won't be an easy sell because it's a difficult subject." Um, but that he loved it, and he was going to go to bat for it, and he has gone to bat for it.
It feels like a movie. I hope that in his trusted hands, it will do just that.
It's a tough one, but if anyone can do it, Shane can.
Yeah. Yeah. I would echo that. All right. Let's talk about Remote the Six. First of all, for folks who don't know what Remote the Six means, how about let's start there and break down what is Remote the Six, and then I got questions about the word remote and its premise.
Okay, so Remote is this is a serial killer FBI manhunt book. The protagonist Lucas Stark, has been forced to work with someone who's supposedly a remote viewer, who has worked for the CIA, and it isn't just someone that's wants to weasel their way into a case, that type of thing. This is someone who's been appointed by the FBI director himself and vetted and said, you've got to work with this person. We've had 18 months of people being killed, and we're nowhere. So Remote is that remote viewing that the CIA actually worked with, and so did Russia, trying to figure out if it's true, if it can work, where someone sees something somewhere else in live time. They can sense it, they can see it, they can sometimes hear it. And this involves this enigmatic person who's partnered with this FBI agent, supposedly can do this. And he was involved with a program through the government that was sort of trying to harness he and 5 others along
The
way,
six.
in a way that focused solely on this ability they thought they had, to hone it, to sharpen it, to figure out who of them might have some sort of other variation of it that they could use, so that's where Remote comes from and the 6 comes from.
Now, when I was reading it, I wasn't even pages in, and I could not help but think of that Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report, with the characters, the precogs, the precognition, kind of, they could see crime before it happened or as it was about to happen, and it made me think of this. So is that a similar, and of course that was clearly sci-fi.
Right.
But this shares that, doesn't it?
That was, I think, Philip K. Dick, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is someone's ability to see something as it's happening. And like this character says, I'm not 4K HD or whatever the new thing is now. I'm like an old cassette tape that, or an old videotape that sometimes gets snarled in the machine, and I can't just, I'm not live streaming what I'm seeing. I'm getting snippets, I'm getting an idea type thing. So but it would have to, nothing to do with the past really, or nothing to do with the future, just what he can see at that moment. They're desperate to solve the case, the director, and there's a lot of questions for the FBI agent and Giles Garner, who is the remote viewer. They begin as they go along, because Agent Stark is very much a skeptic, and Garner starts to wonder, why am I working on this particular case? There's a lot of mystery behind it.
I never trusted the FBI head. Something in my head. I just never, I'm like, this guy's up to some no good. I don't know what it is, but and maybe it's because I'm getting bent from so much television streaming where the unreliable narrator
Right.
is the kind of the new central focus of stories. So you're like, oh, well, whatever you think it is. I've even got my wife now.
Right.
Tammy's like, we'll be watching a show. Yeah, you know that guy right there? Yeah, it has nothing to do with
it. Yeah.
She's catching on quick. But so this does actually exist. It's almost like a medium, isn't it? It shares.
Almost. Yeah. It's that sort of feel. And going into it, I was thinking, if I'm going to have this, most people, myself, and the federal agent are skeptics. And he's especially so, and he doesn't want anything to do with this guy. He debunks profiling himself in the book. He wants nothing to do with profiling, and sees this as just another crank. He doesn't care if the FBI director has appointed him. If you're going to have to prove it to me. So throughout the book, I didn't want it to be just a given. I didn't want it to be because I'm not a master at it. Like a king can just convince you in a page. Yeah, they got this stuff. They can remote view. They could start fires. They can, shine. They have the shining. But I wanted it to be where, in the suspense of the novel, you're not always sure if this guy, even when he seems to be convincing you and convincing the FBI agent that he's on the up and up. Because how do you actually prove that you're seeing something in real time when no one else can, unless you happen to have like a video feed coming from the same place at the same time that he can't see?
Well, the way that his body was breaking down and he was just kind of in a state of meltdown. So you were always wondering, is this some kind of psychosis and he's in the middle of a breakdown? And once he actually sees something, he's just going to melt down in the corner? Or does he actually have the talent?
We'll continue our chat with Eric Rickstad after this short break. Stay with us. When you think of the best thriller fiction authors in the world, who comes to mind? Could it be Don Winslow, Meg Gardner, Adrian McKenty? Check, check, and check. How about T.J. Newman, Lou Berney, or Steve Hamilton? Again, a triple check. The company behind those half-dozen #1 New York Times bestselling authors is The Story Factory, this week's sponsor. And today's guest, Eric Rickstad, is part of that esteemed group, and his new book, Remote the Six, is a thriller so terrifying you must see it to believe it. A serial killer is rampaging across the country, tying families to chairs arranged in puzzling tableaus, then murdering them without leaving a single trace of evidence. FBI Special Agent Lucas Stark has been hunting the tableau killer for 18 months, but seems to be 2 steps behind in a maze of dead ends. So when Garner, an odd loner with a vague past, claims he's a remote viewer, someone who sees people, places, and events from far away, Stark begrudgingly takes him along in hopes of catching the killer. Pre-order your copy of Remote the Six today, wherever you buy your books.
Welcome back to the Thriller Zone.
My favorite part of the whole story, and I came to this knowledge late, was that something happened in your early childhood that kind of fed this. I want my listeners to hear this story because that's when I went, oh, Eric's been keeping something up his sleeve.
Well, it depends on which story you're talking about. Is it my friend Phil, who was a fugitive? Yeah.
Yes. Tell me that story because this kind of fed this, right?
Yes, it did. Well, there's a point in the book where the killer is getting across the country and killing families in multiple different states that are hundreds, thousands of miles apart from each other. But he's a fugitive and he has no ID necessarily. He doesn't have a driver's license. He doesn't have cash or a job. So how is he getting from place to place? When I was 17, I had a friend who was 21. He had lived in Vermont up until a year and a half before then, and he had been a friend of mine. One day I came home from school, I think it might have been a year out of school from my job, and I was watching CNN and just the regular old headline news, and this is CNN. All of a sudden it breaks into a live fugitive chase. This is 1987, I think it was. This is the first ever CNN or any network following a fugitive live on air. And so I'm just watching it. And this guy had just robbed a bank in Denver, Colorado, armed robbery. He left, he fled, the helicopter's following him. State troopers are following him in different cars. It's going on for quite a while. He tries to kidnap a mother and a young child, and they escape. He shoots at the helicopter with a handgun. The helicopter pilot is a Vietnam helicopter pilot. I mean, you can't really write it. And I'm watching it, and no one's ever seen anything like this before, a chase, let alone, someone armed shooting at a news helicopter. And then he kidnaps an elderly man, has him commandeer the pickup truck, or he's driving the pickup truck, but he's got the guy at gunpoint in the passenger seat. He hits and kills a state trooper on the highway going about 85, 90, right on live TV. And I'm just like, oh my God. And finally, this the helicopter pilot has had enough, and he puts the helicopter down in a parking lot in like a supermarket parking lot. The FBI, state troopers, local cops all converge on this truck. They get the elderly man out, and they throw open the door to the driver's side where this fugitive is, and they shoot him on live TV 17 times. And then they show his mugshot, and it's my friend Phil. And I'm still just speechless. I was like, what happened? And he had been in prison for kidnapping a kid and holding him hostage for a ransom, and had put him in the back of a tool vault in the back of his truck. Of course, the tool vault is meant to keep people out, so the hinges are in the inside. And the kid had a hammer in there or a screwdriver or something, and popped the hinges from the inside and escaped. So my friend had been doing 25 to life in a Texas prison, and he had escaped a Texas prison and was on the lam when he robbed the bank. Well, I had seen him 6 months after he left Vermont, so like a year and a half earlier. I was at a gas station with my mom, and at the time, I'm 16, and Phil shows up, and he's 19, and we're at this gas station. He pulls up in a convertible green Corvette, and he was the type of guy. This is a charming, athletic, funny guy. He could charm, a baby to your grandmother without even a blink. He's just one of those guys. He's one of those guys that he was literally, while he was pumping gas at the gas station, smoking a cigarette.
Of course.
I do that, we blow up. You know what I mean? He was one of those guys that could and hey, Mrs. Rickstad, hey, Eric, how you guys doing? Well, that car was stolen, and he was a fugitive at that time. And what he had done, having no job, having no cash, having no ID he could use because he'd be flagged, he went from town to town by stealing different car in a different state each time, so that it was harder to figure out, the same guy who dumped out this car here stole a car here. And now he's, especially in 1987. And he would wait by ATMs at night in like places, college town type places where young kids were out late at night drunk. Oh, I got to get some more cash. And as soon as they got their 60, 80, $100, whatever it was for the rest of the night, he'd stick a gun and, when they were outside of the view of the camera, he'd wait, he'd follow them just a little bit and just take their money. This is a guy who no one could figure it out until we learned about what had happened to him before he moved to Vermont from DC. And then some of it made sense.
Which was?
Well, it's really awful. It's I don't even want to say, for personal reasons, because I'm still friends with my sister's friends with his sister and stuff, but it was awful. It would be where you could see, this really would disrupt the arc of someone's life if he's not helped. But it doesn't necessarily explain, the violence and the desperation, but at least it gave, some sort of indication where, all was not well when they first moved to Vermont.
So how did you translate that, sitting there as a youngster, seeing this happen with a friend of yours? That's got to be startling. All in of it.
This was a very close friend,
Yeah. Those circumstances or those details or that ATM, which is what one of your character in the, what was he? Q. So Q used that same. So I understand that little, this is one of the things, back to the thing we started the show about, you're being a writer. You're taking those little tidbits, you put it in a notebook, you remember it, and you come back to it later. Of course, we all do that. My point is, then you take it to the next level. I want to go, how did you get from that to remote? And the great thing about this story, and I want to make sure I don't give it away, is the way that you set up the story, and you think these rash murders are one thing. Oh, well, it's just a wacko he's just, killing people. And I always kept going, why do people do that?
Right.
Then you peel the onion back a couple of layers deeper, and the stink comes out, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. So this killer in Remote has got a lot of other deeper, more profoundly sort of disturbing reasons for doing what he does, at least in his mind.
And here's the other thing. As a kid, what is it that you joked about that your mom said had a comeback for? This is on a press release that I read somewhere.
I don't know. I know she was a big Richard Widmark fan, and she loved Kiss of Death, the movie. I don't know if this is it, and I would give her trouble.
No, you didn't you joke that you killed a man?
Oh, yes, yes,
And
yes.
what did your mom say? Son?
So I was joking at school before school started one morning, and with my normal friends, well, maybe not my normal, but
Right.
friends who knew that when I was telling something that seemed outrageous, I was just making up a story to pass
Was
time.
Phil in that group, by the way?
No, he was
Okay.
not. But um, so we were asking, we were deer hunters, and he said, "Oh, did anyone get anything this weekend?" I said, "Well, I shot a skier." And they're, "Oh, yeah, yeah," and I joked around about it, and someone at the table next door, nearby in the cafeteria, who did not know me as well and know I was just passing time, said, you know, reported it. And the cops went to my mom's work, and they went to my sister's bank where she worked, and it was cleared up eventually. Now it would be CNN headline news, but and my mom said, "Look, you can't keep telling these stories. People don't know you're joking. They don't know." I was like, "Well, what am I going to do?" I love telling. She's just said, write them down, and call them fiction so people will know. And so that's what I've done since I was like in ninth grade. You can get away with it if you write it down. If you just blat it out and anyone hears it, you can get yourself in trouble. It's like, okay. So it was good advice.
Little did mom know that she was spawning the New York Times #1 bestseller, Eric, with books like this. Good advice, though, wasn't it?
It was very good advice.
You want to read a book that I think I read this. I read it in 2 sittings. I read it in about a half a day. Once you start, you can't stop. This is one of those books that you literally. Well, I'm just gonna one more chapter, just one more chapter. Now, I'm not usually that guy. I'm like, I can put down a book. I got one more chapter because I got other shit to do. But this one was like, okay, well, just one more. Oh, just one more. So 6 is here. 5 is coming out in April, May, June, July. 4 months.
Yeah.
And so 5 is backwards, I'm guessing. So it's a prequel to this.
Well, it's one less than 6. So there's one, there's one, not to the, but there's one, perhaps one fewer viewers kicking.
Right. Well, we know that there are 6 viewers indeed in all. We know that one probably didn't make it. I'm just going to guess. Then you got the one that's in this story. So then now, yeah, you've got another one. So I'm assuming, and I'm getting to a point here. I'm assuming that you're going to finish out all 6.
That's my assumption too.
Yeah, because when I was reading this, and I think I shared this with my wife. I'm like, because we loved this television series called Manhunter. Do you remember that one?
Is it Mindhunter or Manhunter?
Sorry, Mindhunter.
Yeah, I love that. I'm still. It's got canceled.
I could go on a tangent right now about things that get canceled that have no reason being canceled, and then other movies that win Oscars that have no reason winning Oscars. I'm not going to go down that road, but boy, I could spin a yarn right now that would curl your screen.
Yeah. Mindhunter was a great show. I loved that show.
So good. Oh my God. Anyway, so it made me think of that. And when we done, Tammy and I looked at each other and we're like, yeah, TV series. So this has to be a TV series. So would you get Shane? I mean, Shane's got a lot on his plate. I get it, but come on now.
He's working. Believe me.
Hardest working man in
He's
Hollywood.
working. Yep.
Well, you're the second hardest working man in Hollywood. If you got 2 coming out inside of 6 months.
Yes.
Will that mean that maybe 4 would be in time for Christmas?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Folks, as you can see, he's not giving me anything. Well, hey, listen, as we close, we always ask best writing advice. I know you gave me one last time, but for those who missed our conversation about Lilith, and I'll include a link on the show notes below that they can go back and view that. Has your writing advice changed since then? If so, share it. If not, share it anyway.
If you're really compelled to write, you'll have that thing inside you where you have to write, and to set up a structure where you're better off writing even 20 minutes a day every day than saying, I'll write 4 hours on Saturday. Now, if Saturday at 4 hours is the only time you can do it, great. But I sort of see it as, you're working your mind, you're working your imagination. The more frequently you do it, the more it taps into your subconscious and it just starts going. So your subconscious is constantly working, but you got to sort of feed it by doing some conscious work so that when you're not writing, I get a lot of and this is for a lot of writers, when I'm mowing the lawn or when I'm painting the wall behind me,
Yeah.
or whatever, and it'll come, but it wouldn't have come necessarily if I hadn't been writing consistently. So I say write as frequently as you can for as long as you can. And, I used to write, I wrote The Silent Girls in the morning before I went to my day job for 8:00. So I'd get up at 4 and I'd write from 4:30 to 7 and then get ready to go off to work. And then I would write after my wife fell asleep and write from 10 to midnight. So whatever you can, it's consistent. I think consistency is better than one big chunk. It'd be like, I can only go to the gym once a week. But I'm going to go for 6 hours. Well, might not be the best way to go about it, but if it's the only way, that's fine. But
I was just going to use that analogy because, a lot of people go, but I don't have an hour to work out at the gym. Do you have 15 minutes?
yeah,
Well, yeah, I got 15 minutes. Well, then just go spend 15 minutes. Because what you're going to teach yourself is muscle memory,
right.
which is just a habit, which is basically discipline, and then it will just stack upon itself.
Yeah, and that's the same with writing. It's like discipline and muscle memory, mind memory. You're using that part of your brain that you don't use in any other way except in writing. It taps into things that you just can't tap into unless you're doing it.
I am going to add a note to that, and I've learned this over the decades. I'm a big proponent of changing your environment. Like you might have a routine of your office, which is great. I think that is great. Got a routine, doors closed. Tammy knows when that door is closed, don't come knocking because you're going to take me out of my rhythm.
Yeah.
But one thing I like to do is change up the scenery. So we just a couple of weeks ago went up to Lake Tahoe. And the nice thing about changing the scenery is not only are you getting a little break from your routine, but it opens your mind because you're probably going to be relaxing maybe. It opens your mind to just some possibilities. And I'm walking along one day and I'm talking to someone who lives there and they were talking about this particular casino. Well, the casino used to be run by Frank Sinatra. Well, I'm like, oh my goodness. And then they told stories about, well, right over there, our friends, Marilyn Monroe and he were hanging out one day yelling at the top of their lungs. And all of a sudden, I'm just sucked into that story. Then I found this book sitting in the library of the house that we were visiting, and it's the history of Lake Tahoe. So I looked up that story. See, is that story really true? It is true from that local Gazette. Long story short, I went down this rabbit hole. And by the end of the afternoon, I had beat out an entire story with like 10 points, new characters, all based on a few facts that I read. And I walked away going, that was just a great exercise. Yeah. My point here is this. Will I turn that into a story? Maybe. It's pretty darn good. But if not, it was a great afternoon spent in exercise and disciplining to keep those muscles working, to not be focusing on something maybe that you're myopic about over here. And I think it's just a good way to exercise the muscle.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I write in a notebook, first draft. I write everything with a pencil in a notebook. So, which does allow me that freedom to write wherever. So I'll write on a bench somewhere at the rec park while my kids are doing their thing or whatever. And I'll write, out along a stream, or I'll write while I'm in the airport, and I don't have to worry about the laptop and is it charged. And, I have boxes and boxes of all the drafts of all my novels in spiral notebooks and moleskins and, every kind of notebook imaginable.
And will it be in consecutive order? In other words, if you've got an idea, you'll just start writing. You're not doing out beat points or outlines or so forth. You're just kind of starting the story going, aren't you?
Yeah. I just sit down and start, but they're in all sorts of disarray and
sure.
Arrows drawn and
yeah,
scratch. But I find it very satisfying too to
Yeah.
scratch something out, hitting the delete key back, it's only so satisfying. It's like not being able to hang up the phone, like literally hang up the phone on someone anymore, where you just,
Yeah.
I win, or, or maybe not. I lose. I'm the loser because I'm hanging up. But it's fun to scratch things out with a pencil.
Sure. Well, folks, once again, the book is Remote the Six. You want to learn more, go to ericrickstad.com. Of course, the link will be right here. Eric, as always, a joy.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, folks, that's a wrap for another week of the Thriller Zone. But before I go, I've got an inside peek of next week's guest. Nick Kolakowski has written another sizzler in Where the Bones Lie. Get ready for a fast-paced, darkly funny thriller with a twist you won't see coming when Nick joins us next week. This is your friend Dave Temple saying thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week for another episode of The Thriller Zone.
Your #1 podcast for stories that thrill, The Thriller Zone.
Imagine a vehicle that doesn't just take you places, but transforms every journey into an adventure. Introducing Rivian's all-electric R1T pickup and R1S SUV, where innovation meets the call of the wild. With up to 850 horsepower and a tri-motor powertrain, Rivian's R1 vehicles accelerate from 0 to 60 in just 2.9 seconds. So whether you're navigating city streets or exploring off-road trails, Rivian delivers unparalleled performance. Inside, experience the perfect blend of luxury and durability. With an EPA estimated range of up to 405 miles on a single charge, Rivian keeps your adventures going longer. And now, with hands-free highway driving capabilities, your journeys are as effortless as they are exhilarating. Starting at only $69.9, the Rivian R1T offers exceptional value for those ready to embrace the future of driving. Electric adventure vehicles designed for wherever your spirit leads. Visit Rivian.com to explore more. The Thriller Zone with Dave Temple has been sponsored by my good friends at the Story Factory, an entertainment company representing many of the biggest fiction and nonfiction authors in the world.